Thank you, Chairman. Welcome, fellas. I guess I'll start out with Mr. Rivera. The SBA covers losses not covered by insurance, and how closely does the SBA work with insurance companies to make sure the costs are allocated properly?
Congressman Schilling, what we actually do is we send out a field inspector, and the field inspector goes to the property, and they come up with an estimate of what it's going to cost to repair, replace the damaged property. We encourage disaster survivors to go ahead and apply first and not wait for an insurance recovery. That way we can go ahead and get the funds in the rebuilding process through quicker, and then we can work with the insurance companies once the settlement is made. The difference between when we do an inspection and when an insurance company does an inspection is we do it based on fair market value, where most insurance companies will take a depreciated value approach. So there is a gap, and usually that's what our loan entails.
Oh, very good. And then also, disaster victims still report that there are numerous paperwork burdens related to the IRS paperwork. And how closely do you guys work to improve that gap?
Yes, sir. That's something that we also hear. We've worked closely with the Internal Revenue Service. We actually have a one-page form, and not to get technical here, but it's called an IRS Form 8821. And what it does is once a disaster survivor signs that one-page form, it enables us to go directly to the Internal Revenue Service, and we get copies of their tax transcripts, certain items. So we've streamlined that process, where in the old days we used to ask for 3 years of federal tax returns, paper copies, bring that in. We currently have that as part of our streamlined process, where they fill out that one page. It's just they sign it, and we can provide that to the Internal Revenue Service, and then they can provide us with copies of their tax transcripts.
Very good. That's streamlining.
Thank you.
Awesome. And then, Mr. Scheer, just a couple of questions. Has the SBA developed a system to make improvements based on customer services, from surveys that you might be getting back?
SBA has they have some good tools. They have taken some actions in terms of there is an annual survey of customers that they receive information. Mr. Rivera and others state that when they're out in the field that they do listen to people. What we're looking for is more of a formal process, especially when whether it's the resource partners like the small business development centers and others involved in the process, when we conduct our audit work, we hear of certain pain points. Some have to do with the topic you just brought up, having to do particularly with the business loans. But we think that it would be useful for the agency to have more of a formal process to try to deal with these pain points, whether it comes from the annual survey or whether it comes from other sources, and to have a formal process to act on it.
Very good. And then lastly, since most disaster victims first must apply for FEMA assistance, are the applications you feel are falling through cracks when being transferred between the two agencies, or is that something that we've got a pretty good grip on also?
Okay, you're asking me? Okay. We saw that process was really very badly broken after Hurricane Katrina. And that was the one time we looked really in depth at that process. And part of the problem was when FEMA referred to SBA, that SBA took so much time to reach a decision. And especially if it was a decline decision, it was hurting the recipient or the victim. It was harming them by not getting a rejection to be able to go back to FEMA. So that process was broken down. We have not looked at that process since our work following Hurricane Katrina.
So would you say that since Katrina, have we had any disasters that would really help us test the system out to see how tuned up it is?
We have, and this, I'll refer to my answer to Ranking Member Velazquez, that we have some windows, including the report we did for this committee, what we looked at the 2008 disasters. It gives a window as far as how responsive is SBA, how are things working, coming up with certain recommendations having to do with, loan application process and things of that nature. So we have a certain window, but we do not quite see, the extent of a disaster anywhere of the magnitude of Katrina. But we have seen, for example, looking at the Act, that there have been certain regulations for working with FEMA. So we haven't gone out and tested those regulations, but we do observe that there's regulations in place to address that problem.
Okay, very good. I yield back my time. Thank you.